Objective was to storm Juno Beach and then seize the cities of Caen and Bayeux with 14,000 soldiers and 1,000 paratroopers. During the first wave, 3,000 lion-hearted Canadians rushed towards German pillboxes, taking heavy casualties. They were then followed in by tanks, which obliterated most of the German beach defenses, allowing infantrymen to swarm in and begin close-quarters fighting. Impressively, it took them less than 2 hours to secure their first route off the beach at the small town of Courcelles. By the end of the day, Courcelles-sur-Mer, Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer, and Colombiers-sur-Soleil had all fallen, and the tank regiment of the 1st Hussars were at the Caen-Bayeux highway intersection, making them the only Allied unit on D-Day to actually reach their final objective. The Devils Brigade. In World War II, the Canadians distinguished themselves not only as dependable infantrymen, but also as skilled commandos in a joint American-Canadian unit called the 1st Special Service Force, better known as the Devils Brigade, or the Black Devils. The Devils Brigade was formed in June 1942 and had only accepted individuals into its ranks who were already well acquainted with survival and the outdoors. As a result, former skiers, parachutists, hunters, lumberjacks, trappers, and game wardens made up the majority of its personnel. These hard and rugged men were transformed into killing machines via a brutal training regime that involved 100-mile speed marches and specialist training with all sorts of weapons, explosives, and vehicles. To strike fear into their enemies' hearts on the battlefield, they placed a calling card on the dead, emblazoned with the phrase, "The worst is yet to come," in German. The Black Devils were assigned the most dangerous assignments, with one of their most iconic missions taking place in December of 1943 at the mountain peak of Monte la Defensa, southeast of Rome. For about a month, multiple British, Canadian, and American assaults attempting to dislodge the Germans at the top had been wiped out one after the other. By the time the Devils Brigade arrived on the scene, Monte la Defensa had been battered with over 200,000 shells, earning it the nickname the $1,000,000 Hill. At 1:30 a.m. on December 3rd, carrying 60-pound rucksacks as well as knives, guns, and bayonets, and with charcoal-blackened faces, 600 men of the 1st Special Service Force began climbing up the near-vertical cliff face as fog and swirling snow enveloped the mountain. A little before 6 a.m., they reached the summit and began quietly slitting the throats of sentries. Then, all of a sudden, a rock slide gave away their position and the enemy opened fire. The fighting was intense and both sides suffered heavy losses, but the battle-hardened Germans were eventually expelled. In a mere 2 hours, the month-long standoff had been ended by a force that was 10 times smaller than the combined Allied force that had up until then failed to take Monte la Defensa. With a little help from the Americans, they had shown that once again, that to mess with a Canadian in wartime is to sign your own death warrant. When they weren't going on deadly nighttime raids, the Canadians could usually be found slaughtering prisoners of war. Shockingly, in World War I, the murder of German POWs was actively encouraged by some commanders. Before the attack on Vimy Ridge, for instance, one soldier recalled how an officer told him, "Remember, no prisoners, they'll just eat your rations." The most powerful justifications were revenge and battle rage. In a typical account, one lieutenant would recall how, after losing half of his company to machine gun fire, his surviving men rushed to the battery that had caused the damage to find the Germans inside crying and with their hands up. Unmoved, they proceeded to mercilessly bludgeon and shoot them to death. Another would relate on one occasion, a German rushed to one of his comrades with a bayonet, but then chickened out and surrendered. In his own words, "Our boy would have none of it. He lunged at the German again and again, who each time lowered his arms and stopped the point of the bayonet with his bare hands. The German was screaming for mercy." Even if a surrendering German somehow survived his initial encounter with a wild colonial, his life was still in great danger. In this regard, one veteran would remember how he once witnessed one of his fellow Canadians turn a German POW into red mist by dropping a live grenade into his greatcoat pocket.